On a Friday afternoon in early November, Marcus Whitfield walked through the revolving doors of the Grand Wynn Hotel in Manhattan, wearing clothes he had purchased that morning from a Goodwill in Brooklyn, a torn jacket that smelled faintly of mothballs, jeans with frayed cuffs and stains on the knees, scuffed work boots that were a size too large, and a wool beanie pulled low over his forehead, and within 30 seconds of entering the marble lobby, he was intercepted by 2 security guards who looked at him the way you might look at a cockroach that had wandered onto your dinner plate. The guards did not touch him, not yet, but they positioned themselves in a way that blocked his path to the front desk, and the taller one, a white man in his 40s with a military bearing and a name tag that read D. Patterson, said in a voice that was professionally neutral but unmistakably hostile, "Sir, can I help you with something, or are you just passing through?" It was not a question. It was an instruction to leave. And Marcus Whitfield, who was worth $4.7 billion and who owned a controlling stake in the investment firm that was currently in negotiations to purchase the Grand Wynn Hotel for $850 million, who had flown first class from San Francisco that morning specifically to conduct an unannounced inspection of the property before finalizing the deal, felt the familiar tightening in his chest that came whenever he was reminded that no amount of money, no amount of success, no amount of power could fully insulate a black man from being judged by his appearance. Marcus Whitfield was 52 years old, with close-cropped graying hair, dark brown skin, and the kind of face that could look either kind or severe, depending on his mood. He was 6 feet tall, solidly built, with the broad shoulders of someone who had played football in college and still worked out regularly despite a schedule that left little time for anything beyond work and sleep. He had been born in Oakland, California, raised by a grandmother who cleaned houses for wealthy families in the hills, and he had put himself through UC Berkeley on scholarships and student loans, graduating with degrees in economics and computer science. His first job out of college had been at a small investment bank in San Francisco, where he had worked 100-hour weeks and learned how money moved through the world, who controlled it, and how to position yourself to control it too. By 30, he had left the bank to start his own firm, Whitfield Capital Partners, focusing on distressed asset acquisitions and turnarounds. By 40, he was managing over $2 billion in assets. And by 50, he was one of the wealthiest black men in America, with a portfolio that included commercial real estate, tech startups, hospitality ventures, and a reputation as someone who could see value where others saw only risk. The Grand Wynn Hotel had been on Marcus's radar for 6 months. It was a historic property, built in 1923, located on 5th Avenue between 56th and 57th Streets, within walking distance of Central Park, and some of the most expensive retail real estate in the world. The hotel had 300 rooms, 2 restaurants, a rooftop bar, a spa, and a ballroom that had hosted everyone from presidents to movie stars. It had once been the crown jewel of New York luxury hospitality, the kind of place where Rockefellers and Vanderbilts stayed, where deals were made over martinis in the Oak Room, where the staff knew your name and your preferences before you even checked in. But over the past 2 decades, the Grand Wynn had lost its way. Ownership had changed hands 3 times. Management had cut corners to stay profitable. Deferred maintenance had accumulated. Reviews on TripAdvisor and Yelp had declined from 5 stars to 3.5. And while the hotel still traded on its name and history, the reality was that it was struggling, bleeding money, and ripe for acquisition by someone who had the vision and the capital to restore it to what it had once been. Marcus had that vision. He had already renovated 2 historic hotels, one in Chicago and one in New Orleans, and both had become profitable within 3 years. He knew the formula: invest heavily in infrastructure, upgrade the guest experience, train the staff to deliver exceptional service, and market the property as a destination rather than just a place to sleep. The numbers on the Grand Wynn were challenging but not impossible. The current owners, a private equity firm based in Connecticut, were motivated to sell. They had bought the hotel 5 years earlier, with the intention of flipping it quickly, but the market had shifted, their capital had dried up, and now they were willing to take a loss just to get the property off their books. Marcus's team had been negotiating for 3 months, and they were close to a deal. But before Marcus signed anything, he wanted to see the hotel for himself, not as Marcus Whitfield, billionaire investor, but as an ordinary person. He wanted to see how the staff treated guests when they thought no one important was watching. He wanted to see if the culture was salvageable, or if the rot had gone too deep. So Marcus had come up with a plan. He would dress as someone unhoused, someone who looked like they had nowhere else to go, and he would walk into the Grandwin and see what happened. He would observe how the staff reacted, how security handled the situation, how long it took for someone to ask him to leave. It was a test, the kind of test that revealed more about an organization than any financial audit or management report ever could. Because how you treated people who had nothing, people who could not benefit you in any way, that was the measure of your character. And Marcus needed to know what kind of character the Grandwin had before he bet nearly $1 billion on it. He had not told anyone on his team what he was doing. His chief of staff, a woman named Lydia Chen, who had been with him for 8 years, would have tried to talk him out of it. His attorney, a man named Gerald Foster, who handled all of Marcus's acquisitions, would have warned him about the legal risks, and his wife Simone, who was currently in Paris for Fashion Week, would have told him he was being reckless and that there were better ways to assess a hotel's culture. But Marcus had learned over the years that sometimes you had to see things for yourself, unfiltered, unscripted, to understand what was really happening. So he had told no one. He had flown to New York alone, checked into a different hotel under a pseudonym, gone to Goodwill early that morning, and changed into his disguise in a coffee shop bathroom. Then he had taken the subway to Fifth Avenue, walked the final blocks to the Grandwin, and entered through the revolving doors, ready to see what kind of hotel he was about to buy. And now, 30 seconds after walking in, he was being confronted by security. Marcus looked at D. Patterson, the taller guard, and kept his expression neutral. He knew that how he responded in the next few seconds would determine how this played out. If he identified himself, if he pulled out his wallet and showed his ID and explained who he was, the guards would be mortified and the test would be over. But if he played the role, if he stayed in character, he would get the information he needed. He would see exactly how the Grandwin treated people it deemed unworthy. "I am looking for the restroom," Marcus said, keeping his voice quiet and non-threatening. He had practiced this, had thought about how someone in his assumed position would speak, would carry themselves. Deferential, but not obsequious. Tired, but not aggressive. Patterson's eyes narrowed. "The restroom is for hotel guests only. Are you a guest here?" "No, but I just need to use the facilities. I will be quick." The second guard, a younger Latino man whose name tag read J. Ruiz, stepped closer. "Sir, this is a private hotel. If you are not a guest, you need to leave." Marcus glanced around the lobby. It was elegant in a faded kind of way, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers and dark wood paneling that had probably been beautiful once, but now looked like it needed refinishing. There were a few guests scattered around, sitting in leather armchairs with their phones and laptops, and several of them had looked up when the guards approached Marcus, their expressions a mix of curiosity and discomfort. A woman at the concierge desk was watching too, her face carefully blank. If stories like this make you think about the invisible hierarchies that shape our daily lives, hit that like button, because what happened next would expose not just one hotel's failings, but a pattern that runs through the entire luxury hospitality industry. "I am not causing any trouble," Marcus said. "I just need to use the restroom." Patterson shook his head. "I am going to have to ask you to leave, sir. If you do not leave voluntarily, I will have to escort you out." Marcus felt the anger rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. This was what he had come here to see. This was the test. "What if I wanted to rent a room?" he asked. "Would you let me use the restroom then?" Patterson's expression shifted just slightly from professional neutrality to something harder. "Sir, our rooms start at $600 a night. Are you prepared to pay that?" The implication was clear. Patterson was saying, "You cannot afford to be here, so stop wasting my time." Marcus met his eyes and held them for a long moment. He was tempted to say yes, to pull out the black American Express card he had in his pocket and book the most expensive suite in the hotel just to see the look on Patterson's face. But that would defeat the purpose. He needed to see how this played out when he had no leverage, no power, no way to demand better treatment. "I understand," Marcus said quietly. "I will leave." He turned toward the door, but as he did, he heard Patterson mutter something under his breath to Ruiz. Marcus did not catch all of it, but he caught enough. "These people," Patterson said, his voice low but audible, "always trying to get something for free." Marcus stopped. He turned back slowly and looked at Patterson. "Excuse me." What did you just say? Patterson's face went carefully blank. I did not say anything to you, sir. I was talking to my colleague. I heard what you said, these people. What did you mean by that? I do not know what you are talking about. Now please leave or I will have to call the police. Marcus stared at him for another moment, then nodded. All right, I will leave. He walked out through the revolving doors into the cold November air and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing hard. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from anger. He had heard it. Patterson had said these people, and the meaning was unmistakable. It was code, the same kind of code Marcus had been hearing his entire life. These people, people like you, people who do not belong here. Marcus walked half a block down Fifth Avenue, turned into a Starbucks and went into the bathroom. He locked the door, took off the beanie and the torn jacket, and looked at himself in the mirror. He was still Marcus Whitfield, still a billionaire, still someone who could buy the Grandwin 10 times over if he wanted to, but for the past 5 minutes, he had been invisible. He had been judged and dismissed based on nothing more than his appearance, and that, more than anything, told him what he needed to know about the hotel. He pulled out his phone and called Lydia Chen. She answered on the first ring. Marcus, hey, how is New York? Lydia, I need you to do something for me. I need you to pull the HR files for the Grandwin Hotel, specifically the security staff. I want background checks, employment history, any complaints or disciplinary actions on record. I want it by end of day. Okay. Can I ask why? Marcus told her a condensed version of what had happened. When he finished, Lydia was quiet for a moment. Marcus, are you serious? You went undercover as a homeless person. I did. That is insane. What if something had happened? What if they had called the cops and things had escalated? But they did not. I left, and now I know what kind of culture that hotel has. So, what are you going to do? I am still going to buy it. But things are going to change. Get me those files. Marcus hung up and changed back into his regular clothes, which he had packed in a small duffel bag. He put on dark jeans, a cashmere sweater, and a tailored wool overcoat. He swapped the scuffed work boots for Italian leather shoes. He took off the beanie and ran a hand through his hair, and then he walked out of the Starbucks and back toward the Grandwin, this time as himself. When Marcus walked through the revolving doors the second time, the reaction was different. The same 2 security guards were still standing near the entrance, but they did not approach him. A concierge glanced at him, smiled politely, and returned to her computer. Marcus walked directly to the front desk, where a young white woman in a crisp uniform looked up and said, "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the Grandwin. Do you have a reservation?" "I do not," Marcus said, "but I would like to book your best suite for the weekend." "Of course, let me see what we have available." She typed on her computer, her fingers moving quickly across the keys. "We have the executive suite available, which is 1,500 square feet with a king bed, separate living area, marble bathroom, and a view of Central Park. That is $1,200 per night." "That sounds perfect. I will take it for 2 nights." "Wonderful. May I have a credit card and ID, please?" Marcus handed over his American Express black card and his driver's license. The woman, whose name tag read Emily, glanced at the card, then at the ID, and her eyes widened slightly when she saw the name. She looked up at Marcus, her professional smile still in place, but now tinged with something else. Recognition, maybe, or nervousness. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, "it is a pleasure to have you with us. Let me get you checked in right away." She processed the reservation quickly, handed Marcus 2 key cards and said, "You are in suite 1407. The elevators are just past the lobby to your right. Is there anything else I can assist you with?" "Actually, yes, I would like to speak with the general manager. Is he or she available?" Emily hesitated. "Mr. Brennan is in a meeting right now, but I can leave a message for him to call you as soon as he is available." "Please do tell him it is urgent." "Of course, Mr. Whitfield." Marcus took the key cards and walked toward the elevators. As he passed the security desk, he glanced at Patterson and Ruiz. They were both looking at him now, and there was something in their expressions that suggested they had just realized who he was. Marcus did not say anything. He just walked past them, got into the elevator, and rode up to the 14th floor. The executive suite was impressive, at least on the surface. High ceilings, elegant furnishings, a view of the park that would have been stunning if the windows had been cleaner. But Marcus was not here to admire the view. He walked through the suite, noting the details. The carpet was worn in places. The paint on the walls was chipped near the baseboards, The bathroom fixtures were polished but outdated. The minibar was stocked, but the prices were absurd. $8 for a bottle of water, $15 for a candy bar. It was the kind of suite that looked good in photos, but revealed its flaws upon closer inspection. Marcus took out his phone and started taking notes. By the time his phone rang 20 minutes later, he had documented a dozen issues that would need to be addressed if he bought the hotel. The call was from a number he did not recognize. He answered, "This is Marcus Whitfield." "Mr. Whitfield, this is David Brennan, General Manager of the Grandwin. I understand you wanted to speak with me." "I do. Can you come to my suite?" 1407. "Of course. I will be right up." David Brennan arrived 10 minutes later, a man in his mid-50s with thinning brown hair, a grey suit and the kind of smile that looked practiced. He shook Marcus's hand with the appropriate amount of firmness and said, "Mr. Whitfield, it is an honor to have you staying with us. I understand you are interested in speaking with me." "I am. Please, have a seat." They sat in the living area of the suite, and Marcus got straight to the point. "Mr. Brennan, I am going to be direct with you. I'm in the process of acquiring this hotel. The deal is not finalized yet, but it is close, and before I sign anything, I wanted to see the property for myself." Brennan's smile faltered. "I see. I was not aware that we were being sold. The current owners have been discreet, but yes, Whitfield Capital Partners is in advanced negotiations, and based on what I have seen so far, I have some concerns." "What kind of concerns?" Marcus leaned forward. "About an hour ago, I walked into this hotel dressed as someone experiencing homelessness. I wanted to see how your staff would respond, and within 30 seconds, your security guards approached me and told me to leave. One of them, a man named Patterson, implied that I could not afford to be here and made a comment referring to these people, meaning people who look like me. Your staff judged me based on my appearance and treated me as if I was a problem to be removed, not a person to be helped." Brennan's face went pale. "Mr. Whitfield, I am so sorry. That is completely unacceptable. If what you are saying is true, I will address it immediately." "It is true, and it is not just about me. It is about the culture of this hotel. You have a 5-star property that is treating people like they are criminals just because they do not look like they belong. That is a problem. A big problem. I understand, and I assure you we will investigate this and take appropriate action. I am not interested in assurances, Mr. Brennan. I am interested in results. I want a full report on your security staff, including Patterson and Ruiz. I want to know their employment history, their training records, and whether there have been any complaints about them. I also want to review your customer service policies, your training programs, and your complaint resolution procedures. I want all of that on my desk by Monday morning." Brennan nodded, his face tight. "You will have it. Good. Because if I am going to buy this hotel, I need to know that I can trust the people running it, and right now I do not." Brennan left, and Marcus spent the rest of the afternoon working from the suite, making calls, reviewing documents, and thinking about what he had learned. By the time Lydia called him back that evening, he had made a decision. "All right," Lydia said. "I have got the information you asked for. D. Patterson, the head security guard. He has been with the Grandwin for 6 years. Before that, he worked for a private security firm and did 2 tours in Iraq as an Army MP. His file shows 3 complaints from guests over the past 2 years, all related to aggressive behavior. 2 were dismissed as misunderstandings, and 1 resulted in a verbal warning. But here is the thing, Marcus. There is a pattern. All 3 complaints came from Black or Latino guests who said Patterson treated them differently than white guests." Marcus felt the anger settle into something colder, sharper. "So this is not an isolated incident. This is how he operates. It looks that way. And the hotel never did anything about it, because the complaints were not escalated. They were just filed away. What about Ruiz? Ruiz is clean. He has been there for 2 years, no complaints, decent performance reviews. He is probably just following Patterson's lead. All right, send me everything you have got. And Lydia, I want you to start drafting a transition plan for the hotel. Assume the acquisition goes through. I want a 60-day roadmap for new leadership, new policies, and a complete overhaul of the security and customer service protocols. You got it." Marcus hung up and stared out the window at the park. He thought about Patterson, about the dismissive tone, the comment about these people, the ease with which he had judged Marcus and decided he did not belong, and he thought about the 3 complaints that had been filed and ignored. How many other people had been treated that way? How many other guests or visitors had walked into the Grandwin and been made to feel unwelcome because of the color of their skin or the way they dressed? And how many had stayed silent, either because they did not think it was worth the effort to complain or because they assumed nothing would change? Marcus had the power to change it. He had the resources, the experience, and the will to turn the Grandwin into something better. But he also knew that change was hard, that it required more than just firing a few bad actors. It required rebuilding a culture from the ground up, setting new standards, and holding everyone accountable. And that was going to take time, money, and a level of commitment that most people were not willing to make. But Marcus was willing, because he believed that how you treated people, especially people who could not do anything for you, was the ultimate test of character. And he was going to make sure the Grandwin passed that test. The deal to acquire the Grandwin Hotel closed 3 weeks later, on a cold December morning in a conference room at Marcus's attorney's office in Midtown Manhattan. The sellers, a private equity firm called Cartwright Capital, had been eager to move the deal along, and Marcus's team had been thorough but efficient. The final purchase price was $825 million, slightly less than the original asking price due to some issues that had come up during due diligence, including deferred maintenance, staffing shortages, and the discovery that several key vendor contracts were more expensive than they needed to be. Marcus financed the acquisition through a combination of equity from Whitfield Capital Partners, a loan from J.P. Morgan Chase, and a mezzanine debt facility arranged by Goldman Sachs. It was a complex transaction, but Marcus had done dozens of them over the years, and his team knew how to execute. When the papers were signed and the wire transfers confirmed, Marcus shook hands with the representatives from Cartwright Capital, accepted their congratulations, and walked out of the conference room feeling the weight of what he had just done. He now owned one of the most iconic hotels in New York City, and he was going to make sure it lived up to its legacy. The first order of business was leadership. Marcus did not trust David Brennan, the current general manager, to lead the transformation he envisioned. Brennan was competent, but he was also part of the culture that had allowed problems like Patterson to fester. So Marcus called a meeting with Brennan the day after the acquisition closed and delivered the news. "David, I appreciate your service to the Grandwin, but I am going to be making some changes to the leadership team. I am going to bring in a new general manager who has experience with hotel turnarounds. You are welcome to stay on in a transitional role for the next 60 days, and you will receive a severance package as outlined in your contract. But after that, I am going to need someone else in the top job." Brennan's face was a mixture of resignation and relief. "I understand, Mr. Whitfield. I will do whatever I can to help with the transition. I appreciate that. And David, for what it is worth, I do not think you are a bad person, but I think you were managing a property that had lost its way, and you did not have the tools or the support to fix it. That is on the previous owners, not on you." Brennan nodded. "Thank you for saying that." Marcus spent the next 2 weeks interviewing candidates for the general manager position. He wanted someone with luxury hotel experience, someone who understood service culture, and someone who had a track record of turning around underperforming properties. He found his candidate in a woman named Regina Carter, who had spent the past 5 years running a Ritz-Carlton in Miami and had previously worked for Four Seasons and Mandarin Oriental. Regina was in her late 40s, black, sharp as a knife, and known in the industry for her exacting standards and her ability to inspire loyalty in her staff. Marcus flew her to New York, gave her a tour of the Grandwin, and laid out his vision. "This hotel has incredible bones," Marcus said as they walked through the lobby. "But it has been neglected. The service is inconsistent. The culture is broken. And there have been issues with how staff treat guests, particularly guests of color. I need someone who can come in, assess what is salvageable, and rebuild everything that is not. That is going to mean tough decisions, including letting people go. Are you comfortable with that?" Regina looked around the lobby, her eyes taking in every detail. "I have done this before. It is not easy, but it is necessary. If you want to create a culture of excellence, you cannot compromise. You have to set the standard and hold everyone to it. That is exactly what I want. The job is yours if you want it." Regina smiled. "When do I start?" Regina officially took over as general manager of the Grandwin in early January. Her first week on the job, she conducted a comprehensive review of every department, from housekeeping to food and beverage to security. She interviewed staff, reviewed complaint logs, examined training records, and walked every inch of the property with a critical eye. At the end of the week, she met with Marcus in his suite, which he had been using as a temporary office, while the hotel underwent its transformation. "All right," Regina said, pulling out a tablet and scrolling through her notes. "I have got good news and bad news. The good news is that there is a core group of employees here who care about this place and want to see it succeed. The housekeeping staff is solid, the kitchen staff is talented, and the concierge team is excellent. The bad news is that there are some serious cultural issues, particularly in security and front desk operations. Your instincts were right. This place has been coasting on its reputation for too long, and the standards have slipped. What about Patterson?" Regina's expression hardened. "Patterson is a problem. I reviewed his file, and I also spoke with several staff members confidentially. The complaints you saw were just the tip of the iceberg. Multiple employees told me that Patterson has a pattern of treating Black and Latino guests differently. He is more likely to question them, more likely to ask if they are guests, more likely to assume they do not belong, and he has created a culture among the security team where that behavior is normalized. It is toxic and it needs to be addressed immediately." "Fire him," Marcus said. "Today, I will. But I also want to make sure we do it the right way. I'm going to document everything, conduct a final interview with him to give him a chance to respond, and then terminate him for cause. That way, if he tries to sue, we have a solid case." "Good, do it." Regina terminated Patterson that afternoon. She called him into her office, presented him with the evidence from the complaints and the witness statements, and gave him the opportunity to respond. Patterson denied everything, said the complaints were exaggerated, and accused Regina and Marcus of targeting him because of his race. Regina listened calmly, thanked him for his time, and then informed him that his employment was being terminated effective immediately. Patterson left the building escorted by 2 other security guards, and Marcus, watching from his suite via the security cameras, felt a grim satisfaction. It was not revenge. It was accountability. Over the next 3 months, Regina rebuilt the Grandwin from the inside out. She hired a new head of security, a former Secret Service agent named Thomas Grant, who had experience with high-profile protection and a reputation for professionalism. She retrained the entire front desk staff, bringing in a consultant from the Ritz-Carlton to teach them the art of personalized service. She upgraded the employee break rooms, increased wages for hourly workers, and implemented a profit-sharing program to give staff a stake in the hotel's success. And she instituted a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, with clear procedures for reporting and investigating complaints. The changes were not universally popular. A handful of employees quit, saying they did not like the new standards or the increased scrutiny. But the majority stayed, and many of them embraced the transformation. They liked the new training, they liked the higher wages, and they liked working for a hotel that was trying to be the best rather than just good enough. Subscribe to this channel if you believe that excellence requires accountability, because what Marcus and Regina built together would become a model not just for one hotel, but for an entire philosophy of hospitality rooted in respect, dignity, and the belief that every guest deserves to be treated like they belong. 6 months after the acquisition, the Grandwin reopened to the public after a brief closure for renovations. The marble floors had been repolished, the chandeliers had been cleaned and repaired, the guest rooms had been updated with new linens, modern technology, and bathrooms that sparkled. The restaurants had new menus crafted by a Michelin-starred chef Marcus had lured away from a hotel in Paris, and the staff, from the valets to the housekeepers to the concierge, had been trained to deliver the kind of service that made guests feel like they were the most important person in the building. Marcus attended the reopening gala, a black tie event attended by celebrities, business leaders, and members of the press. He stood in the ballroom, glass of champagne in hand, and watched people admire the transformed space. Regina found him near the end of the evening, her face glowing with pride. "We did it," she said. "I've been getting compliments all night. People are saying this is the best they have seen, the Grandwin look in 20 years. Marcus smiled. "You did it. I just wrote the checks. You did more than that, you cared. Most investors, they would have bought this place, made some cosmetic changes and flipped it for a profit. But you invested in the people. That is what made the difference. I learned a long time ago that buildings do not make a hotel. People do. And if you treat your people well, they will treat your guests well. It is not complicated. No, but it is rare. The reopening was a success, and over the next year the Grandwin's reputation soared. Occupancy rates climbed from 65% to 92%. Revenue per available room increased by 38%. The hotel started winning awards, including a Forbes 5-star rating and a spot on Condé Nast Traveler's list of the best hotels in New York. And the reviews, both online and in the press, were overwhelmingly positive. Guests praised the service, the attention to detail, the feeling that they were being cared for rather than just processed. But Marcus knew that the real test was not what the reviews said. The real test was whether the culture he and Regina had built would last. So he continued to visit the hotel regularly, sometimes as himself and sometimes incognito. He would book a room under a fake name, dress casually, and see how he was treated. And every time, he was treated with respect. The staff smiled. They called him Sir. They asked if there was anything they could do to make his stay better. It was a stark contrast to that first visit, when Patterson had told him to leave. 2 years after the acquisition, Marcus was sitting in the Oak Room bar at the Grandwin, having a drink after a long day of meetings, when a man approached his table. The man was white, in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit and an apologetic expression. "Excuse me," the man said. "Are you Marcus Whitfield?" Marcus nodded. "I am. My name is James Cartwright. I was one of the partners at Cartwright Capital, the firm that sold you this hotel." Marcus gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Please, have a seat." Cartwright sat down, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to reach out because I have been following what you have done with the Grandwin, and I have to say, I am impressed. When we sold the hotel, I thought you were overpaying. I thought you were making a mistake, but you proved me wrong. This place is thriving, and I wanted to apologize." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Apologize for what?" "For not seeing the potential, for letting the hotel deteriorate under our watch. We were so focused on the numbers, on trying to maximize returns, that we lost sight of what made the hotel valuable in the first place. You came in and fixed all the things we were too short-sighted to fix. So, thank you, and I am sorry." Marcus took a sip of his drink and considered his response. "I appreciate that, but here is the thing, James. You did not just let the hotel deteriorate. You let the culture rot. You allowed staff to treat guests poorly. You ignored complaints. You prioritized short-term profits over long-term sustainability. And that is not just bad business. It is bad ethics." Cartwright nodded, his face flushed. "You are right, and I am not making excuses. But I will say this. I have learned from it. I have started looking at our other properties differently, thinking about culture and service in ways I did not before. So, thank you for the lesson." Marcus watched him leave and thought about the conversation. He was not interested in Cartwright's redemption arc. He was interested in results, and the results, at least at the Grandwin, spoke for themselves. 3 years after the acquisition, Marcus received a call from the president of the New York Hotel Association, inviting him to speak at their annual conference. The theme of the conference was "The Future of Hospitality," and they wanted Marcus to talk about his approach to hotel management and culture transformation. Marcus initially declined. He did not consider himself a hospitality expert, and he was not interested in being held up as some kind of savior figure. But Regina convinced him to do it. "Marcus, you have a platform," she said. "You have the chance to influence how other hotels think about culture and service. Why wouldn't you take that opportunity?" So Marcus agreed. He stood on a stage in front of 500 hotel managers, owners, and executives, and he told the story of the Grandwin. He told them about walking into the lobby dressed as someone homeless and being told to leave. He told them about Patterson and the complaints that had been ignored. And he told them about the decision to acquire the hotel, fire the people who were perpetuating the problem, and rebuild the culture from the ground up. "The hospitality industry talks a lot about service," Marcus said, looking out at the audience. "But service is not just about bringing someone a towel or making their bed. Service is about making people feel like they belong. It is about treating everyone who walks through your doors with respect, regardless of what they look like, or where they are sitting, or how much money they have. And if you are not doing that, If you are allowing your staff to judge and dismiss people based on their appearance, then you are not in the hospitality business. You are in the exclusion business." He paused, letting that sink in. "When I bought the Grandwin, I did not just want to turn a profit. I wanted to prove that you could build a culture of excellence without compromising your values, that you could invest in your people, pay them well, train them properly, and hold them accountable, and that those investments would pay off in higher occupancy, better reviews, and long-term profitability. And I'm happy to say that we proved it. The Grandwin is more profitable now than it was when I bought it, and it is also a better place to work and a better place to stay." That is not a coincidence. That is cause and effect. The speech was well received, and afterward, Marcus was approached by dozens of people who wanted to talk, to ask questions, to tell him about their own struggles with culture and accountability in their hotels. Some of them were skeptical, saying that Marcus's approach only worked because he had deep pockets and could afford to invest heavily. But Marcus pushed back. "It is not about how much money you have," Marcus said. "It is about your priorities. If you prioritize short-term profits over long-term sustainability, if you cut corners on training and wages and benefits, then yes, you might save money in the short term, but you will pay for it in the long term with high turnover, poor service, and a damaged reputation. Culture is not a luxury. It is a foundation, and if you do not invest in it, everything else you build will be unstable." 5 years after the acquisition, Marcus decided to step back from the day-to-day operations of the Grandwin. He was still the owner, still involved in major decisions, but he wanted to focus more on other projects and spend more time with his family. He promoted Regina to president and CEO, giving her full operational control, and he transitioned into a board chair role, meeting quarterly to review performance and strategy, but otherwise staying out of her way. "You have earned this," Marcus told Regina during their final transition meeting. "You took a broken hotel and made it one of the best in the city. I trust you to keep it that way." Regina smiled. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything, for believing in me, for giving me the resources to do this right, and for caring about more than just the bottom line." "The bottom line matters," Marcus said, "but it is not the only thing that matters, and I think we proved that." 7 years after the acquisition, the Grandwin Hotel was featured in a New York Times profile titled, "How One Billionaire Transformed a Struggling Icon." The article detailed Marcus's undercover visit, the decision to acquire the hotel, and the cultural transformation that followed. It included interviews with employees who spoke glowingly about the changes, and with guests who praised the service and the atmosphere. And it included a quote from Marcus that captured his philosophy. "Excellence is not about being perfect. It is about caring enough to try, and when you fail, caring enough to fix it." The article went viral, shared tens of thousands of times on social media, and sparked a broader conversation about discrimination in the hospitality industry. Other hotels started implementing similar training programs, reviewing their complaint procedures, and auditing their security practices. It was not a revolution, but it was progress, and Marcus was proud to have been part of it. 10 years after the acquisition, Marcus was back in the lobby of the Grandwin, standing near the spot where Patterson had confronted him a decade earlier. He was there for a celebration, a gala marking the hotel's 100th anniversary. The lobby was filled with guests, staff, and dignitaries, all of them dressed in their finest, and the atmosphere was joyful and elegant. Marcus stood near the entrance, watching people come and go, and he thought about how much had changed. The Grandwin was no longer a faded relic trading on past glory. It was a thriving, vital part of the city's hospitality landscape, and it was a place where everyone, regardless of their background or appearance, was treated with dignity. A young black man approached Marcus, extending a hand. "Mr. Whitfield, I am Terrell Jackson. I am one of the new security managers here. I just wanted to introduce myself and thank you." Marcus shook his hand. "Thank you for what?" "For what you did. For buying this place and making it better. I read about what happened when you first came here, how you were treated, and I wanted you to know that things are different now. We train our security team to treat every person who walks through those doors with respect, because you never know who someone is, and honestly, it should not matter. Everyone deserves to be treated well." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "That means a lot, Terrell. Keep up the good work." Terrell smiled and walked away, and Marcus stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of the past decade. He had spent $825 million and countless hours to transform the Grandwin, and it had been worth it, not because of the financial returns, though those had been substantial, but because he had proven that change was possible, that you could take a broken culture and fix it, that you could hold people accountable without destroying them, and that excellence was not just about luxury and elegance, but about treating every person who walked through your doors as if they mattered. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because the lesson here is not just about one hotel or one man. It is about the responsibility we all have to speak up when we see injustice, to invest in change, and to believe that a better world is possible if we are willing to do the work to create it. 15 years after the acquisition, Marcus Whitfield was 67 years old, semi-retired, and spending most of his time on philanthropic work and mentoring young entrepreneurs. The Grandwin Hotel was still thriving under Regina's leadership, consistently ranked as one of the top hotels in New York, and regularly cited as a model for how hospitality companies should operate. Marcus no longer owned the hotel outright. He had sold a majority stake to a consortium of investors 5 years earlier, keeping 20% and a board seat to ensure the culture he had built would be maintained. The sale had netted him over $1 billion, which he had used to fund scholarships, community development projects, and investments in minority-owned businesses. On a cool October afternoon, Marcus received a call from Regina. "Marcus, I wanted to give you a heads up. We are being approached by a documentary filmmaker who wants to do a piece on the Grandwin, specifically on the transformation in your story. Are you interested?" Marcus thought about it. "What kind of documentary?" "It is for a streaming service, part of a series on business and social impact. They want to interview you, me, some of the staff, and maybe even track down Patterson if they can find him. They want to tell the whole story." "I do not know. I do not love the idea of dredging all that up again." "I understand. But Marcus, I think it could be valuable. Not for you, but for other people who are dealing with similar issues. If your story can inspire someone to take action, to hold their company accountable, to invest in culture, is not that worth it?" Marcus sighed. "All right, set it up. But I want editorial control over how I am portrayed. I'm not interested in being painted as some kind of hero. I did what I did because it was the right thing to do, and I had the resources to do it. That is it." "Fair enough." The documentary was filmed over 6 months and released 2 years later under the title The Grandwin, A Case Study in Accountability. It opened with footage of the hotel from a century ago, black and white images of elegance and grandeur, and then transitioned to interviews with Marcus, Regina, and several staff members who had been there through the transformation. Marcus told the story of his undercover visit, his voice calm, but the anger still evident. He talked about Patterson, about the complaints that had been ignored, about the decision to buy the hotel and rebuild it, and he talked about what he had learned. "I went into that hotel expecting to see operational issues," Marcus said, looking into the camera. "Maintenance problems, staffing shortages, maybe some financial mismanagement. What I did not expect was to be treated like I was a criminal just because of how I looked, and that experience crystallized something for me. It was not enough to fix the numbers. I had to fix the culture, because a hotel is not just a building, it is a community, and if that community is built on judgment and exclusion, it does not matter how nice the lobby is or how expensive the rooms are, it is still broken." The documentary also included an interview with Patterson, who had agreed to participate after initially declining. He looked older, grayer, and when he talked about his termination, there was a bitterness in his voice. "I was made a scapegoat," Patterson said. "I was doing my job trying to keep the hotel safe and I got fired because some billionaire wanted to make a point. It was not fair." The filmmaker pressed him. "But there were complaints. Multiple guests said you treated them differently based on their race." Patterson shook his head. "I treated everyone the same. If you looked like you did not belong, I asked questions. That is security. That is what I was hired to do." "But who decides who belongs?" Patterson did not have an answer. The documentary was critically acclaimed, winning awards at several film festivals and sparking renewed conversations about discrimination in hospitality. It was shown in business schools, used in corporate training programs, and cited in articles about corporate social responsibility. And Marcus, who had been reluctant to participate, found himself grateful that he had, because the story mattered. Not because it was his story, but because it was a story about accountability, about the courage to confront injustice, and about the belief that things could be better if someone was willing to do the work. 20 years after the acquisition, Marcus Whitfield was 72 years old, living in San Francisco with his wife Simone, and spending his days mentoring, investing in social impact ventures, and enjoying his grandchildren. The Grandwin Hotel was still operating, still excellent, still a place where people of all backgrounds felt welcome. Marcus had long since divested his remaining stake in the property, selling it to the employee ownership trust that Regina had established, ensuring that the people who worked there had a direct stake in its success. But Marcus never forgot that Friday afternoon when he had walked into the Grandwin dressed as someone homeless. He never forgot the look on Patterson's face, the dismissive tone, the phrase "these people." And he never forgot the decision he had made in that moment to not just walk away, but to do something about it. Because that decision had shaped the next 2 decades of his life, had influenced how he thought about business, about leadership, about responsibility. On a warm spring morning, Marcus received a letter from a young woman named Ashley Reynolds, who was studying hotel management at Cornell. She had watched the documentary about the Grandwin and had been inspired to write her senior thesis on culture transformation in hospitality. In the letter, she thanked Marcus for his example and asked if he had any advice for someone entering the industry. Marcus sat down and wrote back. He told her that hospitality was not about buildings or amenities or star ratings. It was about people. It was about making someone feel seen, valued, respected. And he told her that the most important question she could ask herself every day in every interaction was this: am I making this person feel like they belong? He sealed the letter, sent it off, and sat on his porch, looking out at the bay. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and pink, and Marcus thought about all the people who had walked through the doors of the Grandwin over the past 20 years. The families on vacation, the business travelers, the couples celebrating anniversaries. And he thought about the staff, the housekeepers and concierges and chefs and security guards who showed up every day to make those people feel welcome. That was the legacy. Not the money he had made or the awards the hotel had won, but the thousands of small moments when someone had been treated with kindness, when someone had been made to feel like they mattered. That was what it had all been about. And that, Marcus thought, was enough. 25 years after the acquisition, Marcus Whitfield passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his family. The obituaries noted his business accomplishments, his philanthropy, his role in transforming the Grandwin Hotel. But the thing people remembered most was the story of a billionaire who had dressed as a homeless person, been dismissed by security, and responded not with anger, but with action. The story became a parable, retold in business schools and boardrooms and hotel lobbies, a reminder that how you treat people when they have nothing is the measure of your character. The Grandwin Hotel held a memorial service for Marcus in the ballroom, attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched. Regina Carter, now in her 70s and still serving on the hotel's board, gave the eulogy. "Marcus Whitfield taught me that business is not just about profits," Regina said, her voice steady. "It is about purpose. He taught me that a hotel is not just a place to sleep. It is a place where people should feel valued, respected, safe. And he taught me that change is possible if you are willing to invest in it, to fight for it, to believe in it, even when everyone tells you it is too hard or too expensive or too idealistic." She paused, looking out at the audience. Marcus bought this hotel because he saw something in it that others had missed. He saw potential, he saw possibility, and he saw an opportunity to prove that you could do well by doing good. And he was right. The Grandwin is thriving because Marcus cared, because he invested, because he held people accountable, and because he refused to accept a world where people were judged by their appearance rather than their character. Regina looked at the portrait of Marcus that had been set up near the podium. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything, for believing in this place, for believing in me, and for showing all of us what is possible when you refuse to accept the world as it is and dare to imagine it as it could be." The applause was thunderous, and as people filed out of the ballroom, many of them stopped to look at the plaque that had been installed near the entrance, commemorating Marcus's legacy. It read, "In honor of Marcus Whitfield, who transformed this hotel and reminded us all that excellence begins with respect." And in the lobby of the Grandwin, where Marcus had once been told to leave, Where Patterson had made his comment about these people, where the story had begun, life went on. Guests checked in and out. Staff smiled and greeted people by name. And every person who walked through those doors, regardless of their background, their appearance, or their circumstances, was treated like they belonged, because that was the culture Marcus had built, and it would outlast him. If this story moved you, if it challenged you to think about your own responsibility to speak up, to invest in change, to hold yourself and others accountable, then share it with someone close to you. Because Marcus Whitfield's legacy is not just about one hotel or one man. It is about the belief that we all have the power to make the world a little bit better, one decision at a time, one interaction at a time, one act of courage at a time. And that belief, more than any building or business or fortune, is what truly lasts.